Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from Group 3. We're gonna do the presentation about inflation, deflation, and sort of things. But before that, let me introduce ourselves. My name is Devinda Aulia with my three friends Ferdinand Titus, Nadia Tiara Santi, and Sairin Maulina. First is the definition of inflation. Reporting from Bank Indonesia, inflation can be interpreted as an increase in the price of goods and services in general and continuously within a certain period of time. The price increase of one or two goods alone cannot be called inflation, unless it extends or results in a price increase in another. The rising price of these goods and services causes a decrease in the value of money. Thus, inflation can also be interpreted as a decrease in the value of money against the value of goods and services in general. There are several causes of inflation, such as increased demand, the amount of money in circulation increase, the existence of increased production costs, the occurrence of mixed inflation, and sort of things. Uh, and the last is because of public expectation of the economic situation in the future can be the cause of inflation in Indonesia, especially demand inflation or production cost inflation. Inflation is relatively difficult to detect because the occurrence is not too significant. There are different types of inflation, namely mild inflation, moderate inflation, heavy inflation, and inflation is very heavy. First is mild inflation. Mild inflation does not affect the state of a country's economy because the price of goods or service only increase in general. Price increase and mild inflation are below 10% per year. Second is moderate inflation. Moderate inflation can affect economic activity because it can reduce the well-being of people with fixed incomes. The average increase in inflation price range from 10 to 30% per year. Third is heavy inflation. This type of heavy inflation can disrupt the economy because people no longer want to save in the bank. This is because bank rates are much lower than the rate of inflation. Price increase at times of high inflation vary between 30% and 100% per year. And the last is inflation is very heavy. This type of very heavy inflation is inflation that is already difficult to control because of the price increase in inflation is more than 100% per year. There are three indicators that are used as a way to calculate inflation, namely the Consumer Price Index (CPI), Gross Domestic Product (GDP), and the Large Trade Price Index (EHPB). CPI is a way used to calculate the average of the price changes of the collection of goods and services consumed in a certain period, while GDP is used to show the development of prices that exist among producers. For EHPB itself is to show the price that occurs between wholesale trades. The most commonly used indicator is the CPI, which is used to measure the magnitude of the existing inflation rate. Changes that occur in CPI result over time provide an overview of inflation. The following is a formula for how to calculate inflation using CPI, namely below. Example of a problem. In a country, it is known that the CPI obtained in May 2020 is 160.50. Meanwhile, the CPI obtained in May 2019 reached 120.50. Then calculate how much annual inflation the country has. We have the problem solving in here. Inflation with the formula is CPI of the new period minus CPI from the previous period per CPI from the previous period multiply 100%. So that we have the number of answer is 33.2%. Of this result, the amount of annual inflation experienced by the country is 33.2%. That is, inflation experience is included in heavy inflation. Next is deflation. Deflation is a period in which prices generally fall and the value of money increase. If inflation occurs due to the large amount of money circulating in the community, then deflation occurs due to the lack of money in circulation. An expert named Stasia E.H. Sitohang expressed her opinion on deflation. According to her, deflation is the opposite of inflation. In general, the definition of deflation is the price of an item that has decreased. If viewed from the lens of economic, then deflation is not a good or profitable thing. Deflation can wreak havoc in the economic sphere, therefore the state of deflation must certainly be addressed immediately. There are several factors that cause deflation, namely the amount of money that is reduced from circulation, the state budget has a surplus, reduced demand for production, and the amount of production of similar goods is too much. Here are two types of deflation. First is strategic deflation. Strategic deflation is deflation arising from a policy setting. The policy is about controlling the symptoms of excessive consumption. Conditions like this are believed to suppress the increase in the price of products in the market. One of the causes of strategic deflation is because there are policies issued by the government. In addition, policies issued by the central bank are also one of the causes of deflation. Second is circulation deflation. This deflation can be caused by unstable condition in an economic condition. This deflation will take place in the transition of stable economic condition to a slumping economy. This will make the situation unsettling. Circulation deflation will arise because the consumption and production power in the country does not show a balance. This will cause the price of the product to decrease occur in the market during the economic recession. Such conditions begin with a significant decrease in the needs of the community buy goods. There are examples of deflation. First is expansion in the world's industrial revolution. At the end of the 19th century, there was a lot of technology. Technology has emerged in various industries. The goal is to increase production. This makes them compete to produce goods. They even produce excessive quantities of goods, and made a big impact. At that time, the supply of goods became significantly increased, but the price of goods became increasingly shrinking. This is what caused deflation to occur globally. Second is falling prices of food and spice commodities in Indonesia. At the end of 2019, the Central Statistic Agency noted that Indonesia experienced deflation. Deflation occurred about 0.27% in September 2019. This happens because most food commodities and spices, such as red pepper, cayenne pepper, eggs, and chicken, have decreased in price. It is noted that there are 82 cities that experience similar conditions in Indonesia. The last is deflation in Cyprus. Apparently, European countries are experiencing the impact of deflation. That's because the global oil price is Cyprus. The deflation in 2015 in Cyprus was about 3.4% and 0.4% lower than Romania, but it still has a big impact. Cyprus, which depend on the country's economy in the oil and gas industry, sea logistics, and tourism, must experience difficulties. We jump into the next part. The next part is inflationary gap. Inflationary gap occurs when the amount of investment is greater than the amount of saving. At full employment, example, it is known that the level of the economy of a country with investment cost 40, consumption function 0.75y plus 20, and production capacity is 200. Does the country experience a deflationary gap or inflationary gap? So the answer for the question example before is S equal to y minus c, S equal to 200 minus 0.75y plus 20, S equal to 200 minus 0.75 multiply 200 plus 20, S equal to 200 minus 150 plus 20, S equal to 200 minus 170. So the answer is S equal to 30. So because the value of E equal to 40 greater than S equal to 30, the economy is in an inflationary gap of 10. Next is deflationary gap. Deflationary gap occurs when the amount of saving is greater than the amount of investment at full employment. For example, it is known that the level of the economy of a country with investment cost equal to 40, consumption function equal to 0.555y plus 20, and production capacity is 200. 280, does the country experience a deflationary gap or inflationary gap? So this is the answer for example before. So S equal to Y minus C, S equal to 280 minus 0.75Y plus 20, S equal to 280 minus 0.75 multiply 280 plus 20, S equal to 280 minus 210 plus 20, S multiply S equal to 280 minus 230. So the answer is S. Our savings is 50. So because the value of investment equal to 40, lower than savings equal to 50, the economy is in a state of deflationary gap of 10. So from the example of inflationary gap and deflationary gap before, we found the curve which is in order to avoid inflationary gap, the production capacity can be increased from 200 to 240. Meanwhile, in order to avoid deflationary gap, the production capacity can be reduced from 280 to 240. So the curve that is formed is right here below. So that's all from group 3. We are sorry if there are shortcomings and mistakes. Thank you. See you next time. Bye.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hey everyone, before we get into the topic, I hope everyone watching this always safe and healthy during this pandemic. So first of all, let me introduce our group member. We are from group 4 and the members are Clara Stayanwardi, Nurul Ayani, and Yasinta Rahmi. So, in this video we'll talk about how to deal with inflation. But first of all, what is inflation? Inflation is the rate at which the value of a currency is falling, and consequently, the general level of prices for goods and services is rising. And for that, our group have concluded that there are 3 ways or strategy to deal with inflation. And there are fiscal policy, monetary policy, also non-fiscal and non-monetary policy. The first one is fiscal policy. Definition of fiscal policy. Policies taken by the government to maintain stable state income and expenditure so that the country's economy can grow well. More specifically, according to OJK or Otoritas Jasa Keuangan, the definition of fiscal policy is about taxation, revenue, receivables, and government spending policies with certain economic objectives. Fiscal policy objectives. So there are 4 objectives of fiscal policy. The first one, to maintain and improve the country's economy. The first point is that the objective of fiscal policy is to maintain stability and at the same time develop the country's economic condition. The implementation of fiscal policy is expected to be able to influence all sectors of the country's economy and fix problems in it, from the corporate sector, banking to micro enterprises. The second one is to improving the quality of human resources. One of the objectives of fiscal policy is to improve the quality of public human resources, especially in terms of technology and the economy. If the quality of human resources increases, it is hoped that these human resources will have the capability to compete in the national and international world of work, so that their welfare can increase. The third one is to maintaining stability of goods prices. There are many factors that affect the price of goods in the market, ranging from positive factors such as increased demand to negative factors such as hoarding and monopolies. One of the objectives of fiscal policy in Indonesia is to keep the prices of goods affordable for the people and avoid fluctuations due to irresponsible parties. And the last one is to encouraging investment. The last objective of fiscal policy is to create a better investment climate for capital market players, especially investors, so the state can get more revenue from business taxes. Next one, fiscal policy instruments. So there are 4 instruments of fiscal policy. There are tax, government expenditures, government bonds, budgetary allocation. Tax. The first point of fiscal policy instruments is taxes from all domestic and foreign sectors. In order to achieve the objectives of fiscal policy, the government can manipulate taxes in the form of reductions, additions, delays, and even eliminations. The next fiscal policy instrument is government expenditure, which can also be reduced or increased as needed. If the country's balance of payments is in deficit, the government can reduce its spending in certain sectors. For example, sebagai contoh, untuk mendelay pembayaran THR bagi PNS. The third instrument of fiscal policy is government bonds, or debt securities for citizens. In contrast to foreign debt, public bonds have a coupon rate or commission bonus when the government returns the loan to the public. The last fiscal policy instrument is the budgetary allocation. In order for the objectives of fiscal policy in a certain period to be successful, the government has the authority to transfer budget allocations from one sector to another. For example, during a pandemic, the government can prioritize the budget for health facilities. So, from the objectives and instruments of fiscal policy that we talked about before, how fiscal policy can deal with the inflation. The first one, decrease in government expenditures. Shipping by the government makes up a large part of the circular revenue stream in the economy. During periods of high inflation, the government can reduce spending to reduce the money supply. In many cases, high government spending is the root cause of inflation. However, it is often difficult for governments to distinguish between essential and non-essential expenditures, so spending policies must be supplemented by taxes. The second one, tax increase. An increase in the tax rate reduces the amount of money people have to spend on goods and services. The effect of taxes can vary with the type of tax imposed, but any increase in taxes will reduce spending in the economy. An increase in taxes combined with a decrease in government spending can have a double effect on the money supply in the economy. The last one is savings increase. To achieve this, the government should introduce high-interest public loans, attractive savings schemes, and GHT or pension funds. These measures lock people's income into savings accounts for a long period of time and are an effective way of controlling inflation.
What is monetary policy? Monetary policy is one of the ways to deal with inflation that can be done by the government. Monetary policy or financial policy can be done by increasing or decreasing the amount of money in circulation. This is done to maintain monetary stability with the aim of increasing the welfare of the people of the country. Another monetary policy is to conduct an open market operation policy. This policy can be done by controlling the money supply.
Next, we are going to talk about is non-fiscal and non-monetary policy. So aside from using fiscal policy and monetary policy, the government can also use non-fiscal and non-monetary policies. What are non-monetary and non-fiscal policies? Non-monetary and non-fiscal policies are policies taken by the government without affecting the amount of state expenditure and income and without affecting the amount of money circulating in the community. There are at least 5 ways that are included in the non-fiscal and non-monetary policies that are usually carried out by the government. The first is increased production. The government will produce policies that can help the entrepreneurs to produce more. With so many goods circulating in the community, the circulation of money will be faster and the money circulation become balanced again.
The second is facilitate the entry of imported goods. Not all goods can be met by domestic producers. For this reason, facilitating the entry of imported goods is one solution to meet people's needs. This can be done by lowering taxes and also facilitating the licensing of imported goods. The third is by stabilizing people's income. Keeping people's income from rising can also be one way to suppress the rate of uncontrolled inflation growth. The fourth is by setting the maximum price. When inflation occurs, the price of goods tends to rise uncontrollably. This is what makes the purchasing powers of people decrease. The amount of purchasing decreases, and by setting a maximum price, the government hopes that the people purchasing will be regained. And last but not least is by supervising of goods distribution. The hampered distributions of goods is also one of the factors that increase prices in an area. The large demand is not matched by the limited number of goods. Due to the delay in the distribution of goods, by carrying out supervision can deal with inflation, hoping these goods can be quickly distributed. That's all the presentation from Group 4. I'm sorry if there are any mistakes that we might have said, and thank you for watching.